Well, I know he said he was going to go to.
Yep.
Yeah.
We are live. Sorry about that. If you just joined us, we're not keeping secrets or anything like that. We're just keeping secrets. Yeah, something like that. Yes. I see lots of things. Okay, so
I see dead people.
so I want to throw this out there. I've been doing these simulations with Twitch. I'm having a lot of fun with them. And the not to be a spoiler or anything like that, but I'm really surprised at how good NHL 16 is at this. These games are really entertaining. I mean, we did this a couple years ago during the lockout, and they've gotten a lot better. It's a lot easier to move players around. I created a team of under 23, so it was tricky to do because there are some little rules it has. Like I wanted to originally make them the Erie Otters, and just that way I could just keep McKinnon on the team and just go from there. But I wasn't allowed to move certain players over certain ages to the Erie Otters, so I had to change that around. And I couldn't take younger players and put them into the NHL because that's not allowed either. So there were certain things there. So what I ended up having to do, which I found kind of interesting, if no one else does, is I made them the Rochester Americans because I figured this is a U23 North American team. So I built them around the Rochester Americans. Well, what I did simulation-wise yesterday, I'll show you this a little bit of this. This is fun kind of to watch. So I'll show you guys if you guys haven't seen it. I put it on a special blog because I didn't want to just engulf people with this on my regular blog with all these live streams. So I did move it to an NHL Buzz blog. But if you go through this, I'll show you some of the stuff. So I played the U.S. versus Canada. And the first two games I didn't stream. I just did it myself, and they were really good games. And the first game, Canada won 5-4. The second game, the U.S. won 2-1, and Jonathan Quick just stood on his head. Really, literally, was an incredible. Made some huge saves. So then from there, I said, okay, I'll play game 3 out, and I'll broadcast that one, which I did, and it was a great game. Went to overtime, and I'm playing NHL rules, so overtime is 3-on-3. Which I didn't really realize right away, but that's incredibly entertaining, of course, at this level. And if we eventually do this, we'll do this as international rules, I guess. But with international rules, I get international size rinks, so I wanted to keep the rinks kind of smaller because they're going to play on a smaller rink. And Canada ends up winning the whole thing on a goal by Duncan Keith in overtime, 4-3. So they won the 3-game series. So then I created the U23 team. Hello, Kevin.
We're live, Kevin.
Hey, Gav.
Hey there.
Hey, so we are live. I'm talking about my simulations I've done here, which have been really cool. I took the Team Canada, Team USA, and under 23 teams that we did, and I put them onto NHL 16, and then I broadcast a couple of the simulations on Twitch.tv, which is a really fun service, which I haven't really played around with before. So I've been shocked at how good they're doing. I mean, NHL 16, they did a great job with this simulation-wise. And once you put the players together, it took me a couple hours to put all the players on the right teams. But once I got them, there's a Team USA, there's a Team Canada. That's easy enough to do. I can do that. So I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to show you guys something real quickly. Got to stop this. Sorry. All right, ignore that for a second. Okay, so once I got that all together, I put together a U23 team, and I used the Rochester Americans as my. I needed some. There was no basis, like no uniforms or anything like that. So I figured I would use the North American aspect of the U23. So I made them the Rochester Americans. So here's a little bit of the. So what I did is I did Canada versus the under 23s and the U.S. versus the under 23s, and with surprising results, really surprising results. So. I'm going to mute this.
While you're pulling that up, that's an interesting little sidelight here for the World Cup next August and September. Is what's the uniform for the under 23 team going to be? Is it going to be like a split of the Canadian and U.S. flag, or I mean, what do you think it's going to be? I mean,
right. I haven't heard anything about it, right? So
no, they haven't made their mind up yet what they're going to do. Yeah, I'm not sure what they're going to do. To be honest with you, I think there won't be a flag. It's just a matter of what anthem would be played.
Will they have a baby in swaddling clothes? I mean, because it's the young guns. It's going to be a young representation, so it's got to be. I don't know. I mean, that's what I'm saying. I think since it's
yeah, I don't think they have. They're not. They don't have to do anything.
Right.
Just not. Just not have the anthem. So
here's a little bit of the. I'll bring it up here so you can see a little bit of the. So like I said, the Canada-U.S. They played 3 games against each other. All of them 1-goal games. Canada won 5-4. The U.S. won 2-1, and then Canada won 4-3 in overtime in the decider. Really, I was really surprised how strong the simulations are in this NHL 16. They really are good. Compared to, we did this a couple years ago, if you remember, with greatest teams and all that stuff, and this has just gotten a lot better. So then I put the U23 team together on the Rochester Americans so that they had a uniform, and there's a little bit here. I guess it doesn't look very clear on here, so I'm not going to show you guys, but the gist of this was the U23 team beat Canada in overtime 3-2, and then beat the U.S. 6-2.
I mean,
but as you watch it, and you can sit there and say, okay, this is crazy, and that could never happen, right? But as you sit there and as you watch it, you start to think you start to realize the players that are out there, and as they get the puck, they look like the players. They're all the same numbers and all that stuff, and you start to realize, well, that's Brendan Saad going in against Jacob Trouba or something like that. These guys are not mean he's on the same team, obviously, but this is Brendan Saad coming in against one of the U.S. defensemen, McDonough, and all really great players. But the fact is that there's no reason to think that this U23 team can't compete with these other teams. I mean, overall, yeah, you can say overall, but like my lines where I put McDavid, Gaudreau, and Monahan together on the first line. I figured I'd keep them together. And then I did Eichel, McKinnon, and Saad on my second line. And those 2 lines really just completely kicked butt.
I mean, I don't think I've actually seen anybody say that U23 team couldn't compete. In fact, I think that's the people that they're most concerned about.
Yeah.
Fact that the team would win. However, there is an issue, and that is goaltending. And I don't think the last card has been played on that. I think there's still some discussions going on because I think everyone assumed that Gibson would be farther up the development train than he is thus far. Although he should be on the team this season. I think initially when the concept came out, everyone thought, well, by then he'll be starting for the Ducks. And Connor Hellebuck, I've heard, did not look good in the rookie games, and so now there's a little bit of concern about where his development is at right now as well. So originally they thought this team could be scary. I mean, what I said right from the beginning is the great fear would be is that they would beat Canada, and then there would be like a formal investigation in Canada. Right. Because that's what happens every time something bad happens to Team Canada. There's
a summit.
Yeah, there's a summit that goes on. So everyone assumed that they would do. I mean, if you look at that team, there's a lot of talent. There's 3 Americans that certainly would play, maybe 4 that would play on the U.S. team, at least 3. I think Jones, Trouba, and Saad would have played for the varsity.
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh yeah, and it's hard to keep Gaudreau off the team too. I mean, in a lot of ways. I mean, just based on if he continues.
There's too many wings though. Like I don't think he's a slam. Like he would have to have like Kane's spot or something like that.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, it is. I mean, I do agree that the couple things that are weird about it though. Watching it, like actually watching it, you get a different sense. That's why I wanted to do this. I wanted to see how emotionally I would feel about watching the U23 teams because just. And the one thing that it does take away from is our natural instinct to root for the underdog kicks in. Like you naturally want the under 23 team to win because these are you have your own even when they're going against your own country. Your instincts are okay. I never root against my country, but then there's players on the U23 team that are from my country too. So you can't help but pull for that. It's that same thing you get when you watch the playoffs where you're always pulling for the upset. When you're watching 2 teams, you're always pulling for the upset. So I'm watching it and I'm thinking to myself, the one thing that does bother me about it is it does kill a bit of the nationalistic feeling of the Olympics or of hockey. Like and I know that's probably predictable, but I wanted to see if I actually felt that way. watching a simulation, and I actually did feel like, okay, I want U.S. to win, but do I really want U.S. to win? Because I kind of love the fact that Gaudreau has got 2 goals in the second, deep in the second period. It was, and that McDavid has scored it. Just it's fun to watch these guys.
Well, I mean, to me, it's the exact opposite, Dak. I mean, if you're a Canadian, you're obviously going to root for Team Canada. If you're an American, you're obviously going to root for Team USA. The approach that you take to this under 24 and under team, or 23 and under team, it's very convoluted because there are American players, there are Canadian players on this team. There is no national identity. There's a lot of talent there. If you like individual players, then you have a rooting interest in it. But in terms of a national uniting behind this team, you can't, because I don't think if Canada and the U.S. get eliminated and it's the 23 and under team versus Russia, then Canada and the U.S. will be united in rooting for that team. But otherwise, if it's Canada versus under 23 or U.S. versus under 23, those countries are going to be rooting for the national team and not for this amalgamation that they put together for this tournament.
I don't know.
You kind of lost me there.
I'm not so sure. Like I mean, I think that there is definitely go ahead, Russ.
I'd be rooting for the under-23 team. That's just me. That's the way I am.
You're a prospects guy, so a little bit of a
guy. So I'm going to be watching those guys closely. I'm looking at the other guys in this tournament. I'm looking at the other guys as the fat cats. I'm looking at some of these guys as trying to prove themselves. Again, I would go Zach Fucale in goal if nobody else looks good. He's always good, and so I don't think they're going to have a big problem in goal. I think once you have your number one, I don't think it's that big a deal who's the 2 and 3 in these kinds of tournaments anyhow. And they do have a decent choice still of number ones. Even with what Kevin said, I could go Zach Fucale and be very happy. Like, I wouldn't even have an issue. And even if he is not up to snuff with Jonathan Quick, watching camp and all these other things, this league is about speed, especially on defense, and the under-23 team will have speed on defense. Now, that's not to say the other teams won't, but some of these younger guys do come in with a little bit more charge in their legs. And so that's something where that could really help them and help their goalie regardless.
I think the 23 and under team will be competitive. I think they would have, they're not the favorite to win. I think they're probably middle of the pack. But all I'm saying, just to clarify what I was saying before, if Team Canada is matched up against the 23 and under team in the final of the World Cup, Canada, the nation of Canada, is rooting for Team Canada. They're not going to be rooting for the under 23 team because what is it? It's a combination of U.S. and Canadian prospects. They'll be looking at interest at Connor McDavid because eventually Connor McDavid and other players from that team are going to be playing for Canada in the Olympics or in future World Cups when they're over the age of 23. But I'm just saying the complaint that I had when they put together this tournament and they put the League of Nations team and the Young Guns team is that they really have no base of fans to root for them.
Right.
The
European team I think does, but go ahead, Kevin.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with what Mike said. I mean, I didn't even know that we were even entertaining the idea that Canada would root for under 23 versus Canada. I mean, that of course they're going to root for Canada. I thought what you were saying was, there's going to be a sort of a rooting interest for that U23 team just as a novelty, because we all root for underdogs, and there'll be some measure of conflict when you're watching it play the U.S. because you're going to have, if you're an NHL fan, you're going to have theoretically players from your team on both teams.
Right.
So there'll be some conflict, but I can't even imagine if you're suggesting that some people would actually root, for that U23 team over Team Canada.
All right, here's one. Maybe
I don't see that.
Maybe I can put it better this way, because as a kid growing up, right, I always rooted for Team USA in these events, obviously, because I'm an American.
Right.
However, you already had that conflict because when I was a kid, Bobby Clark was on Team Canada, and to me that was really okay. That conflict existed already without the U23 team. When I would watch the U.S. play Canada, it was hard to root against Bobby Clark. I mean, to me that was just an incredibly ridiculous thing to even think about doing, but I would, because I could put that aside. But then when Team USA would eventually get eliminated, which in those days they would, I would become a fan of Team Canada. Like, I would move on because I would now be following Bobby Clark, and I'd be following, and I think that still sticks to this day, in the Olympics if I'm pulling for Team USA. But if the USA is done, Canada's playing Sweden or whatever, I'm pulling for Canada probably because, even if some of my favorite NHLers might be on Team Sweden, I'm still pulling for Canada. I think what this potentially does is okay, now the U.S. loses and Canada plays the under-23 team in the final. I'm pulling for the under-23 team and not Canada. I'm not saying that that's as an American. There's a weird. It was a weird sense to watch this because when I'm watching U.S. and Canada, I know who to root for. When I'm watching U.S. versus under-23, okay, I can still root for the U.S. team, but there's a little bit of a, because I love some of these kids on the under-23 team are so dynamic. It's hard to not like Eichel and Gaudreau and McDavid and Saad and Monahan and all these players, but then again, Canada under-23, I'm suddenly back in the under-23. I think that's where this weirdness comes from because it's North American. Because
there's a partial representation of American players. I mean,
it's not even that. It's like it's an underdog thing.
I see that. I mean, that makes sense to me.
And it's just a little bit different to watching, usually watching international play. Like the paradigm in our heads has been sort of a certain way, and now I really did want to see, and I did feel weird. Now I want to know, like, what do I think of now if the U23 team's playing? I don't know, the European teams or whatever. I guess I'm pulling for the U23 team, but not really because they're Americans. More like just I'm fans of the players because they're not because there's Americans on the U23 team. I guess that's so. There's something. There's the other question.
It's not all that different from when you're watching the Olympics and the Swiss are playing Canada. Like,
right.
Often, sometimes I do in my head root for Canada.
How could you not? I'm with you. Like the Latvia Canada thing last year was phenomenal. That was an incredible game.
Yeah.
And
so
it was hard,
similar to that.
Because in the back of your head, you're sitting there watching Latvia Canada, saying, "Oh God, if Latvia beats Canada, this is just gonna really." Because you don't really want to see Latvia play the next team, but you do want to see them beat Canada. You're watching that, you're thinking, I really want to see Canada in the gold medal game because that's just exciting. But at the same time, you want to see them beat. So yeah, I mean that was. I still believe that if Shea Weber doesn't score there, Canada's in huge trouble.
Let me ask you this. I know you probably couldn't have done it. I don't know if NHL 16 even has a ranking for Austin Matthews on the Swiss team. I don't know if they had enough time for that, right?
No.
Right. So that's your one wild card.
They didn't have Jack Eichel. I had to create Jack Eichel from pretty much.
So that's your one wild card there too, because if he has a tremendous year overseas playing against men, I gotta believe he's going to get a look at on that team as well.
On the under 23 team, yeah.
Under 23 team, yeah. I mean, and I'm looking at these guys. I'm thinking the potential of some of these guys if we have this again playing on the under 23 team again. Like there's potential for Eichel and McDavid will be there again, right? I mean,
right.
And I thought to myself, is the 23 age pick so it only happens once? If they're doing this every 4 years, and then suddenly I started thinking to myself, oh, maybe that's why they picked 23 because most players come in at 19 at the earliest, and then maybe that's why they only want guys playing on the under 23 team once. I'm trying to think. I'm just thinking in my head, was that why 23 was the magic number that was picked? I don't know.
I think you're putting too much thought into it.
I think
thought into it. I think they probably looked at what age does a guy generally break into the NHL?
Yeah.
And then what age is he generally sort of established? And you figure, by the time a guy's like 22, he's not established necessarily, but if he's a star, he is, and you're expecting this game to be stars. So I think the age is kind of like, I think it does make sense. But there are going to be guys that play 2 or 3 times because now we're getting younger guys breaking into the NHL.
Yeah, no, I mean, now it brings up another question I wanted to ask you guys. And by the way, you're watching the HockeyBuzzCast on HockeyBuzz.com.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I never did the intro today. Kevin Allen and Mike Jello and Russ coming from Sportsology and Kevin Allen from USA Today Sports. And it's the 16th of September. So but let's move on from there because we started off right from the top. We were a little bit late because my Googled me. All this time I thought Googling yourself was that other thing. Anyway, so
let's stop the
transition.
All right, so I'm sitting there and I need your help because I did create a Jack Eichel. Okay, I created Jack Eichel because now McDavid, because they have OHL teams, McDavid was in there, but they don't have college teams. So I went. McDavid was rankings were a little bit on the low side, I thought, but I went with him. But so I'm sitting there and I'm looking at Eichel, and I'm trying to think of a player that I can model him after in the NHL. So I'm because I wanted to take those rankings and do that. So that's my question for the panel. I'll tell you what player I picked, but I wanted to know first of all who you guys would pick if you were in that same spot. Like to pick one player who you're going to take the rankings from. Like overall, this is like because these rankings are intense. They're like wrist shots and accuracy and defensive awareness and agility and speed and all these things. Taking all these things into account, what player can I make my Jack Eichel from?
All right, I got one.
All right, who you got, Russ?
I would say Eric Stahl.
Eric Stahl. That's a good one. I didn't even think of Eric Stahl.
Because of the vision, the size is pretty equal, I think. The Stahl once in a while shows a little physical play. Eichel once in a while will show that physical play. I think he's going to be, real comparable to what Eric Stahl is. I do.
That's a similar type of. Okay, yeah, he's Eichel's 6'3", right? And that's what it says at least. 'Cause I looked up his numbers and
he's probably an inch taller or something. Yeah.
Put their height in there and weight in there, but yeah, I think that Eric Stahl's a good one. That might be better than mine, but I'm not sure. I will debate mine after I hear yours. Mike, who do you think?
Well, I'm not sure if he's as big as him, but off the top of my head, I would have said Ryan Getzlaf. And I actually think Eichel will be a better, more consistent scorer because Getzlaf had some years where he was under 20 goals. Now he's operating at a pretty good clip, but I think he's going to be a better scorer than that. But off the top of my head, that's the comparative I came up with.
Those are two good ones. I did think about Getzlaf. I didn't think of the.
Yeah, I'm not so sure that. Well, he's not as big as Getzlaf, and he's not quite as physical. He's a pass first guy right now. That could change, but I actually did a story on this, and I talked at length with Dan Bausma about it. We had him at the World Championships, and he said he's not really sure whether he is doing it because he's deferring to the older players at this point. He could evolve. Stahl's a good one. I think he has the potential to be a Tavares type guy. He could really be a dominant scorer, to be sure.
He's a better skater than Tavares, though. I thought of skating when I thought of skating. I mean, Tavares has gotten way better at skating, so it's hard to say that he's.
Well, he is a better skater.
He is a better skater, yeah.
If you're categorizing him as more of a pass-first guy, at least early, then it could be a guy like Backstrom, because Backstrom, obviously Backstrom plays with Ovechkin, and he can score, but I think primarily he's a playmaker and a setup guy for Ovechkin.
How about his skating style? Like, I thought about, and I was trying to picture him, when I picture him skating on the ice, the way, he's a very distinctive, which is cool, that Eichel has a distinctive skating style. I think he's...
he could be a Mike Modano. He's not.
That's a good one. Mike Modano's not in my game.
Mike Modano's probably the best one.
Yeah, he's not in my game, unfortunately, but that's definitely where I saw. Well, I went with Taylor Hall, which I think is probably a little different.
Well, he's not a center. He's not a center.
Not a center, but still, I think I just from watching them play and the way the kind of nose they have for the puck, it just kind of reminds me of Taylor Hall in a lot of his actions. I think that he's probably a better shooter than Taylor Hall, but I don't really know that. And this is more or less just based on if I just close my eyes and try to picture Eichel and I try to picture another player in the NHL, I just kept coming back to Taylor Hall as a skater. Russ?
The passing to me is why I picked Stahl.
Yeah.
Taylor Hall is not the passer that Eichel is. He has this touch on his pass, and he can do those cross-ice passes already that, to me, far exceed like a Taylor Hall in that part of his game. And so that's why I went Eric Stahl, because I think he is going to be a pass-first guy in his first year. I don't think he's going to be trying to score a ton of goals. I think you might see 15, 18 goals. I don't think you're going to see more.
Right.
Okay, so another thing is that's a good. I think maybe I was wrong. Maybe I need to redo him because maybe I didn't really think of I don't think of him as a pass first player, and that's good information because I more or less think of him as a shooter because I've seen all the highlights you see from him are goals. They are tend to be him circling around. I think of the overtime goal he scored at the World Championships. That's the kind of that's a Taylor Hall type goal to me. That maybe that's part of it. And a Marc Messier type goal. I think Taylor Hall and Marc Messier, they remind me so much of each other. That now McDavid, I went to McDavid's ratings, and I know that we know who does the ratings for these things, but so I went to McDavid's ratings, and I wanted to see what they were like, and I started tweaking them a little bit myself, which you're allowed to do in the game, because I thought that it was just a little bit under. He was ranked at 87 overall, which is pretty. I mean, still not bad, but most players on both of these teams are, most of the players were at least 85s on the under 23s and up to like 90 or so. So I thought McDavid should be in the 90, right around 90. Eichel was 89 when I was all said and done. So to me, but then I got to one characteristic that I just couldn't believe in the rankings of Eichel. And these rankings go from 0 to 99. It's always the fun thing about these rankings is debating them. His speed was 84. And what I've heard about McDavid is just that the guy can just out and out fly, right? Like I've heard that McDavid is a speedster.
Yes.
So 84 is equivalent to your I don't like that's not when you think of fast players, like I'll take Nathan McKinnon for example, who's like a 96 speed. So I mean, is McKinnon that much faster, Russ, than McDavid? Or
I think the speed in the neutral zone for McKinnon is faster. Yeah, okay. I think that's something that McDavid will pick up over time. McDavid is really fast out on the ice, but McKinnon always had this speed in the neutral zone that was almost the best I've seen, really, from any young player.
The one thing I was struck by with McDavid and the couple times that I've seen him live is his ability to, I'd say, go into top gear in one
acceleration, right?
Right. I mean, not accelerate. I mean, just like from 0 to 60 in 3.3 seconds. I mean, just boom. At the Prospects game in St. Catharines last year, he took the puck in the defensive zone at the face-off circle, and if you blinked, you saw him go through the defensive pairing. I mean, he was that quick, very, very fast.
But I think you just gave the magic answer. He did that at the Prospects game. I've seen him do that in other Prospects games. We don't know what he's going to do at the NHL level, so they're tempering it based on the fact that he's now got to do this in the NHL level, which is going to be different.
Which is legitimate, and then the other thing, the other ranking that was 86 was passing, and to me, that's the one thing that I've heard everybody talk about, and you too, Russ, that the guy was just, they could find everybody, that he's just an incredible passer. So I increased that too. I mean, just a little bit, and he's been good, and it's been very. It's been fun. I mean, my first line for Team Canada was killing it, which was I put Crosby, Giroux, and Tavares together, and just based on the Crosby Giroux chemistry that was at the World Championships, which was really strong, and Tavares I've always believed is the perfect complement for Sidney Crosby. So that's the fun thing about this game. You get to put them together, and I know he did play with Crosby a little bit before he got hurt, right, Kevin? Is that true?
I'm sorry?
That Tavares played with Crosby a little bit last year in the Olympics before he got hurt?
Yeah, he did, yeah.
I always just felt like they really do feel like the perfect complement for each other. So that was fun. So this is fun to do, and I really definitely check it out and see. If you go, I have a blog right now I put up called NHL Buzz, which is below my normal blog, where you can watch the 3 games that I simulated so far. And then this really did make me want to continue and do the other teams. So we're gonna have to move on and do the other teams, this week or at some point. For sure, because that's something we have to go with. Now, the next thing I wanted to discuss here was, Kevin, I'm going to mute you, is my blog title today, which is that Patrick Kane is on the Chicago Blackhawks roster now for training camp. And we've been to training camps, for us. I don't know if this means anything or not, or if it means he's even going to show up. But
that's the thing. It means that they put his name on there.
Right.
It doesn't mean he's going to show up.
Yeah, and taking all this aside, yeah, okay, so you can unmute yourself, Kevin. What I was saying here was that, Patrick Kane is on the Chicago Blackhawks roster, and I wanted to discuss this only training camp roster, and I wanted to discuss this only because I don't see any gain, and I'm not. This is not guilty or innocent or anything of Patrick Kane. I don't see any gain of Patrick Kane going to camp for the Chicago Blackhawks right now. I really see no benefit to it at all.
He's going to be there and he's going to make a statement. I guess there's a couple of ways of looking at it. If I think it's fair to wonder why he wants to be there. He still has this hanging over his head. I think it's also fair to question why the Blackhawks are not advising him to stay away until You at least have some clarity of what the grand jury is going to do in the Buffalo area. I mean, this is not how the Blackhawks want to start the defense of their Stanley Cup championship, answering questions about whether Kane should be there.
Right.
On the other hand, you know, he hasn't been arrested. He hasn't been charged. He hasn't been suspended.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't he have the right to carry on with his life and do what he wants? I mean,
yeah, I mean, all suspended players from other leagues are allowed to go to training camps. NFL had all those guys in camp before they got suspended, so it is their right. It is.
Yeah, and the grand jury is not going to reconvene until well into training camp. I don't think it's going to reconvene until the end of September.
And there's questions whether or not the key witness is even going to talk at that new grand jury reconvening. So there's a whole bunch of things there. But besides that, besides guilty, like I said, this is really not about that. This to me is about Patrick Kane as a leader of the Blackhawks. Like the distraction he brings into the room right now, he's got to realize. I think he should realize that it's not good for them. And
I think the distraction is there whether he goes to training camp or whether he doesn't.
It's not the same.
I mean, let me just say, these players are going to face questions regarding the status of their teammate, whether he's there or not. Now, when he's at training camp, more than likely, all he's going to say is, I can't address the situation in Buffalo because it is under adjudication. It's under investigation. My lawyers have told me I can't talk about it. I'll talk about hockey, but I can't talk about that situation. And they're not going to be happy about it, but they're going to have to leave it at that because he can't talk about it. So I think it's a distraction one way or the other. So I don't think it makes much of a difference whether he's there or not.
Yeah, I think it does.
I do too.
Having been involved in those for a lot of years, it will make a difference if he is there. Because if he's not there, the players will say, hey, look, Patrick's not here. We've got to deal with what we've got going on here. But if he is here, it suddenly becomes every day people will be going to Patrick, seeing if this is the day he's going to say anything. So, I mean, it's a very, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place if you're the league here and if you're the Blackhawks. Because guilt or innocence, none of us have any idea what happened there.
Right.
And they have to make decisions, about their team. And it's, let's just say this: if Patrick Kane was an employee of IBM and he had all this going on in his life, would IBM tell him not to come to work? Probably not. They'd probably say, you're innocent until presumed guilty. Now, if he's charged or arrested or that's a different story. But
no, I agree with that.
Your point is a very valid one, Eck. I think the same thing. I don't know why Patrick Kane would want to be there. I mean, maybe his argument will be that he wants to carry on with his normal life, and I don't know why the Blackhawks would want him there right now. Seemed to me you'd want to get the training camp started. Get all your guys thinking in the right direction, and then, 2 weeks from now or whenever, then Kane shows up and you have one big day. But in the meantime, you get your camp started and you get rocking and rolling and figure out whether Panarin can play on the second line and, where is Teravainen going to fit and all that, and then you deal with the Kane thing.
Yeah, that's where I'm at, because I can get it if he is innocent and there's and if this all has been trumped up, which is always a possibility, then I could see where he would be sitting there like chomping at the bit to go to camp and just like continue his world, and because he's got to be, if he is totally innocent, then this is a completely aggravating situation and he would want to just take. And you could argue, I guess some people have argued that that this is going to be might as well deal with it now because you're going to deal with it eventually. But training camp is not. I don't know. It feels like okay. Give it a week or something like that. Just stick out for a little while. Let some hockey happen before the circus comes to town, because that's where this is going to go.
Yeah, I mean, I'll bet there are a lot of people. I've read all the comments about this on the bottom of all the stories, and everybody's got an opinion on this. But I bet there is a good chunk of people out there who are like I am. Like I am really torn. And when I think about this, by two thoughts. I believe in our legal system that presumed innocent until they prove you're guilty. But I also have sympathy for the idea that sexual assault charges, that the victims, sometimes it makes it difficult for victims to come forward because they're subjected to what this young lady has been subjected to. So it's a very difficult thing to sort through if you're trying to be reasonable, and because we don't know what happened. And both sides of this, I see their positions. I can see why the friends of the woman who believe in her, I'm sure, feel the way they do, and I understand why the friends of Patrick Kane, who hasn't been charged with anything, feel the way they do. It's a really, really difficult situation.
Yeah, there's no winner in this situation at all right now. No matter how it plays out. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. Let's switch to some really good news. The PK Subban, I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but PK Subban is donating $10 million over 7 years to the Montreal Children's Hospital Foundation. That's pretty awesome. Okay, that's a lot of money, and I know people are all being crazy. Oh, it's the taxes in Montreal. It's his way of getting out of paying extra. It's anybody who this is legitimately a good thing. I mean, I don't think there's any debating it.
Yeah. Well, this is what I would say about that. I've heard that for years. Peter Karmanos in my home state donated, I believe it was $57 million, but I could be wrong, but it was around there, to the Karmanos Cancer Center. And I've had people say, well, he's got a lot of money, and he could do that. It's not, Well, guess what? A lot of people have a lot of money, and not all of them are donating $57 million. There are a lot of players in the National Hockey League, and Vinny LeCavier did something of that magnitude down in Tampa Bay. But I haven't heard anybody in the last week from the NHL donating $10 million. I think this is just incredible, and just speaks to the kind of person he is. And to sit around and to demean that level of donation because he receives some benefit for it just seems incredibly ludicrous to me.
It does. It really troubles me when people go there. It really does, because it's just, Saku Koivu did a lot of the same kind of stuff in Montreal. But he did a lot of benefiting. One of the things interesting about PK is, he is the perfect Montreal Canadian in so many ways. Because he just has such a we need a personality, somebody who's really interesting. My favorite Saku Koivu story was, I was hanging out with a player a few years ago, and that player was, there was rumors that that Subban was going to get possibly traded to that player's team, and we were talking over at lunch, and we were just saying, okay, this is, and at that time, the feeling was, oh, he's a me first guy, PK Subban. We don't want him in our locker room. We don't want that, and there was a feeling like that went on for a while in the NHL, and then it's amazing because a few years later, this player ends up, playing with PK and saying out, and just literally taking me out and saying how wrong he was. How PK is completely the opposite of what he thought the perception was, and that he's a great teammate. He's a total. And Russ, you're shaking your head too. So
I could tell you, I've seen him. I was at the Memorial Cup. I've seen his family all hanging out. I've seen him hanging out at times, different places. Great guy, great family. These people were all quality people. They looked out for each other. They were very nice. There was nothing like uppity about them. So I've never seen that. I think that kind of existed because he plays a certain way on the ice, and people assume that in the locker room, and it's not true.
Yeah, it's the furthest thing from the truth. I've been told he's nothing but. He's a teammate who has his teammates' backs all the time, and I'm told it was exactly the opposite from what the perception was outside of the Montreal Canadiens locker room for a while. And I think you did all right, Russ. I think it's because of the style he plays, and the flamboyantness he plays, and his the cockiness and all that on the ice, which is just part of his game, and that's why who doesn't want PK Subban on their team? He's the kind of guy that everybody would love to have on their team.
I got a subject I wanted to address if we're done with Subban. Yeah. I wrote about it this morning. Now I see the NHL has put it out as well. I happen to be talking to Bill Daly about another matter, the deputy commissioner of the NHL, and we got talking about 3-on-3, and my theory that this is probably the single rule change that's created the most buzz in my tenure of covering the league, and I run that by him, and we both concluded the same thing. Like the shootout had a lot of buzz too, but it was in conjunction with a broad rule reformation.
Right.
So it was hard to sort of separate out whether it was, the shootout that was creating the buzz or just the fact that we were trying to open up the game. So, I stick by my assumption that the 3-on-3 overtime for a single rule change has created, the greatest amount of buzz. And he was saying that there some teams had been very concerned about how it was going to play out, and had asked the league to give them the opportunity, and we can call it the Eklund rule because you were the first guy to bring this up, to experiment during the preseason with it, and that's indeed what is going to happen. And I wrote about it this morning.
Is it really?
Yeah, the NHL has just put out the release. They've designated 3 games for each team, in which, regardless of what the score is at the end of regulation, we're going to play 3-on-3 shootout hockey.
Nice.
Yeah, so, and I think it was a good idea, and I think they just, they want to do it because we just haven't played enough 3-on-3 hockey to know how it should be played. And I think you'll see coaches experiment with 3 forwards. I think you'll see, some line matching to see whether it makes any sense. If, for example, the Penguins, do indeed put out Phil Kessel, Malkin, and Crosby, do you come back with 2 defensemen and a forward against them? Just with that, and then resume your normal 1 defenseman, 2 forward format on the next shift.
Well,
I love it.
Not to equate what happens in rookie tournaments to what's going to happen in the exhibition schedule or the regular season, but it's the only thing we have to really go on right now. On Friday in London, the 2 games both went to overtimes. The overtimes lasted less time than the dry scrape in between the third period and overtime. It was less than a minute.
Yeah.
Now, you can say that they were playing more wide open and the consequences weren't there, but at the very beginning, I think that's what's going to be happening. I think these teams are not going to be playing conservative. They're going to be trying to score that first goal as quickly as possible.
We just talked about this at camp today because, they had it in the AHL. I saw 1 game with it in the AHL last year. But in the NHL, it's going to be different, as we know. The 3 prevailing thoughts were, the first one is, they're going to just put 3 forwards and push ahead and try and score in that first minute because, guys, it's hard to change and guys come off completely gassed. So, like older players, you might not want to have them out there for that. You got to have players out there that have amazing stamina, especially at the end of a game. So that's one thing. And then the other prevailing thought was teams are going to sit back and wait for this period to expire. And they're just going to play the not to score.
5 minutes is a long time when you're doing that.
Russ, were you talking to coaches or players?
No. No. We didn't talk to coaches or players. This is just.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. I mean, when I've talked to coaches about this, they want to experiment and see, where it's going to go. And I think they see the 3 forward as a radical option, not a standard option. I mean, I'm not saying they're not going to do it because, when I talked to John Cooper, for example, he said that he is pondering using the triplets line out there because they're pretty defensively responsible. But he said, I don't know whether I'm going to do that. And, Crosby was lobbying, for Malkin and he and Kessel to be out there together. So I think they'll be, the one thing that when I talked to all the players about it at the media tour that came out was the concern about how they were going to change lines. And I can't remember. It might have been Joe Pavelski who said that he felt it would be soccer-like, that they would play the puck back to the goalie, and then everybody would change.
Mm-hmm. That's what will happen, yeah.
And then the other thought was, and I think it was Trouba who said he thought the goalie would simply stop it behind the net, and then everybody would, when the puck goes behind the net, everyone will see that as a chance.
Oh, so just do a little stick handle and wait for them to change.
Right.
And then
Right.
Yeah.
And then I remember Falk said, "Well, it's not that big a deal because we've seen 4-on-3 and we change on that okay." But I think a power play change is completely different because you ice the puck, and then everybody gets off.
And it's the long change. So if a team is dumping into the defensive zone in the opposition zone to get the change, if the defender gets that puck quick enough, those players are still switching off, and you can spring another player on a 2-on-1 or on a breakaway. So I think that the only way that they are going to be able to change is if the goaltender is handling the puck behind the net, or somebody is carrying it into the zone and two people change instead of all three.
Yeah, I mean, Mike, I think you're right on that. I mean, there was a lot of talk from players about maybe they would change one at a time. You know,
to me, probably whoever changes the least, whoever could have players out there that changes the least, will probably have an advantage. You know, if they've got some guys that are really long-winded, it's going to help them because then they can keep them out longer and just end it quicker rather than having to even worry about the rest.
Well, the one thing that did come out, which I thought to me was encouraging, was most of the players, when you talk to, believe that at some point, and you know, very few players are going to play in this. I mean, I think they're essentially going to be just the premium players. At some point, the individual instincts that make these players great are going to kick in, and they're going to see an opening and they're going to go for it. Right. Because that's why they're great players and that's why they're out there. So I think they feel like when they sense that they've got a 2-on-1 opportunity, they're going to go. And, you know, coaching style be damned at that point. And
did you guys see Ken Hitchcock's thing on this?
No.
Oh my gosh, this is awesome.
By the way, let me tell you about that.
Yeah.
Chaos, right? Didn't he call it?
Yeah, he called it chaos. He said he was going to go.
I saw the headline. It said NHL coach said something chaos. I said to myself, that had to be Hitchcock.
Yeah, right. No, it's a great.
Read the story and I knew it was Hitchcock.
This is what is awesome about Ken Hitchcock. I'm going to show you a second of this here because I'm going to get. This is what's awesome about Hitchcock. Totally amazing because Hitch is, you know, I'm just going to get past the ad here.
He's traditional.
Yeah, this is incredible. So I'm going. If I got to get past the ad, sorry, I'm going to mute this while the ad's playing.
Ad blocker, come on.
No. Are you kidding me? What? Just bite your tongue, man. We keep ourselves alive here. Can't have ad blockers. All right, so here is Ken Hitchcock talking about this. Everything's up here. I'm going to put it over here. So here we go. And I will should start any second. It's just loading in right now. Here we go. So, but this is worth watching. I know we don't usually show stuff like this on here, but it's definitely worth watching. And as soon as it loads in, I promise you, it'll be worth watching.
Upgrade that connection, damn it!
I couldn't pay more than I do right now, Mike, for this. Yep. So I mean, anyway, it's coming up any second now. It'll be here, and yeah, it's a really nice logo.
Like a Microsoft presentation.
Here we go. Let me turn up the volume here.
Or in one case, there was one goalie that could move the puck. That's how it goes.
I was going to say, could you use it? We don't have any footage of it because there's nothing in video. You won't find 3-on-3 anywhere. So.
Let me turn this up there.
Yeah.
Well, they should have some opinions. I know Mark Howell at University of Calgary was talking to Hitch and I about it in Kelowna, about some strategy and stuff on how you have to try to manage it. The difference for them at that university level is they don't play the long change. So it's a little different scenario. Well, it's going to be way different, and because when you start the 3-on-3, you're playing on a long change, right? So you're having to go a great distance, and it's really difficult to get on and off the ice. So when you change during the course of play, there's probably not going to be a lot of whistles. In fact, the goalie might be encouraged at times to keep the play going, knowing that the opposition has 3 guys on the ice that have extended their time and might be fatigued. So for Jake Allen, it might serve him well, or else to zip a puck up the ice and keep us, in that flow. But how to get guys on and off the ice is going to be a real challenge.
A lot of goals are scored on fatigue and line changes. Quick ups and breakaway ones. It's a whole different animal. So we're going to experiment with it. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at probably you see 3 forwards out there and going all offense and with the assumption that have the puck and let's go.
You might as well go for it. Like that's the attitude I want is we might as well go for it and find some form with organization, some form of attack mode. But how we put our players on the bench, 2 2 steps means a big deal here, because 2 steps could mean the wrong 2 steps is a 2-on-0 breakaway the other way, and there's all kinds of strategy involved in this. So I would say.
Well, I think it's really,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
really important for those first 4 days that we do it every day. We need to know whether we're going to use 1D, 2D, 3 forwards. We need to know D-zone face-off, what's it look like. There's face-off plays that work only on 3-on-3.
Yeah.
And so that kind of stuff, to me, has to be, we have to have it in play, and then we have to adjust and figure it out the next day. And I think that, because you're only going to use, I don't think you're going to use 3 full units. I think you're only going to use 3 defensemen, and you're going to use 6 forwards.
Right.
Maybe not even 6.
Maybe not even 6.
Yeah.
Like, you think about it, you could put Tarasenko out with whomever. You know, your other considerations then would be Schwartz and Steen, probably. Like, you know, right off the top of your head, you can think of maybe 4, maybe 5 guys. But you'd certainly want to play Tarasenko twice, at least.
Well, and the other thing is defensemen have to take face-offs, possibly.
Right.
So they need to do face-off work. Those are the guys, those 3 or 4 guys that you think might get out there.
No. Shaddy would be another guy that, and Petro. Like, can you just play 2 of them?
Yeah, possibly.
Anyway, that's the thing. It's more of that you can check out on.
I mean, the point that they're making, I think, is what we're going to see with some of these teams is that are the teams that have mobile defensemen who have the ability to jump into the rush, like PK Subban in Montreal, like Ryan McDonough with the Rangers, Toronto with Morgan Riley and Jake Gardiner. I mean, there's a number of offensive-minded defensemen. Those teams are going to have an advantage in 3-on-3 because those players can jump into the attack and also have the speed to get back defensively and thwart the counterattack. But teams that have slower defenses, they may have to consider playing 2 forwards and 1 defenseman or 3 forwards because if they play 2 defensemen, I think they're just waiting for the other team to attack and probably score.
Yeah, I think what we're forgetting too is a lot of defensemen did play forward in another life and may be pretty good at faceoffs. You know, like I go back to, like, in my mind, like Ron Greshner was a defenseman, but they had to make him a forward a couple times, and for 1 year he scored 27 goals as a forward. There are some guys that definitely can do that, and they'll use them. And I think pretty good puck possession guys will help because, like, Tarasenko's always got the puck on his stick, right? So in open ice, which he's used to, right, because he's used to playing on a bigger sheet, well, that's going to be an advantage for him. So I could see some European players playing keep away, like Pavel Datsyuk. If he could be out there, how are you going to get the puck from him?
Right.
Yeah, well, two points with what we saw there. First, you finally see evidence of why the Players Association was a little reluctant to totally embrace 3-on-3 right away, because their concern is that it was going to tax the star players even more than they're taxed, and now we've just seen video evidence of that. They started out talking about, well, you're only talking about 5 or 6 forwards and 3 defensemen, and then they were wondering whether you could get by with only 2 defensemen using them, and now we're going to play Tarasenko every other shift. And right. I think this is exactly what Matthew Schneider was talking about this really, again, first we're talking about 9 players. Now we're saying maybe this is going to come down to 6 players playing all those minutes.
But how dramatically are we changing? How dramatically are we changing from what there was going on 4-on-4? I mean, pretty much you'd have 2 at most 3 pairs of forwards rotating and 2 sets of defensemen. So you're going from 6 or 8, from 10 to 6 or 8. So I mean,
well, but I mean their only point was they felt like it would add 90 seconds possibly,
right,
or a minute, and it may indeed do that. I mean, I think ultimately they came to realize that they all wanted to do it anyway. But
right. But it does bring pressure too. I mean, some star players are going to.
I think it's you shouldn't be mad at a union for standing up for its players. So I think it's legitimate. But the other thing too, I was going to make the point, and Russ knows more about this, so I'll get him to comment on this. But I think every defense has at least 2 guys who can skate. So I mean, there are slow defenses, but almost all of them, I think, have a couple of skaters that they could, work into that. And so I don't know that, like a slow defense, just because you have a slow team defense doesn't mean you don't have a couple of defenders that can move up.
Sure.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, if you look at the Flyers, they don't have the fastest defense, but like Michael Del Zotto, he would do great in that. And you could find somebody else. If Brandon Manning's on the roster at the time, he's really fast, even though he's not your everyday, every minute guy. He might be very useful for this, because if he's only, that's the other thing we have to sort of look at, is if there's a guy who's only playing 6-7 minutes that game, but he happens to be a really fast skater, he might get back out on the ice for that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still, if I was doing it, I would be looking at 2 defensemen and a forward, just for the reasons I brought up before, is that I think you see this as a lot of 2-on-1s against you, and I would much rather have a defenseman. I would much rather take my chances on a defenseman pushing up on the play than a forward coming back and being stuck in a 2-on-1 against him. Like, I think that because defenders can definitely play forward, but not all forwards can play defense. So that's, in my feeling, it's surprising to hear that, I mean, I think going for it is definitely what we're going to see early on. But I do think...
Yeah, I think 1 and 2 is what you're going to see the most often, but I think you'll see all the combinations, don't you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And you're going to see some teams just who have so much talent. Like, why wouldn't the Penguins try Malkin, Crosby, and Kessel? I mean, there are reasons we could say why they wouldn't, but I also think it's going to come into play. What is going to come into play, and what they kind of brought up there is that, with Jake Allen, is that if you've got a goalie who can handle the puck really well, that's a big advantage.
It is a big advantage. Plus, there are some goalies that are really good one-on-one, and then there are some that are not, right? And so now this is even going to be worse, I think, than dealing with the shootout, because you might have a lot of odd man rushes, and so you have to find a goalie. You have to know if your goalie's good at that. If not, you got to strategize for that.
Well, I mean, it definitely gives an advantage for a team that has a goaltender like Tampa has with Ben Bishop. I mean, Corey Schneider is pretty good in terms of handling the puck and forwarding the puck as well, passing the puck up the zone. And if they see an opportunity where a team dumps it in and they intercept the dump in, they can send another player on a breakaway going back the other way. So, I mean, the goaltender is let's just say there are more opportunities for the goaltenders to get primary assists in 3-on-3 than they will have in regulation play.
Yeah, look at an example like Henrik Lundqvist. He's a terrific goalie. He's great one-on-one. He's not great with his stick.
Right.
He is not great.
Bobrovsky's the same way, right? Bobrovsky, I think, of the same way. Like, he's another goalie who does not want to handle the puck. And I remember talking to Mason last year about the shootout, who Mason struggled vastly in the shootout. And the thing he said, I said, we talked about this at one point, would you rather have like a 3-on-3? And he said flat out to me, he said, I'd rather have a 3-on-3 because it has the rhythm of a game. What he doesn't like about the shootout is there's no rhythm to it. Guys can come in at a certain speed, they can come in slow, they can come in fast, and there's no rhythm. Where he thinks even 3-on-3, even though you'll have breakaways and people will there'll still be a rhythm, which goes back to Eric DeHachik's old idea, which I loved from the beginning of last year on the Cranky Hockey Writers show, when he said that there should be during the shootout, the other team should be allowed to start a player at the other blue line to try to catch the guy in the shootout and force him to make a quicker play. I just love that idea. And
guys just kind of dive and trip a guy. I mean, that's what I would do.
Yeah, you can't do the dive and trip, but you're definitely wouldn't that be exciting? I mean, I think that would be amazing. The whistle blows and both are off to the races, and the defender's trying to catch up to the guy, and that would be more the rhythm of the game.
Yeah, it would be like the Australian pursuit race and stuff.
Yes, exactly.
You know what that reminds me of? The XFL, when they used to have the ball and they put it in the middle and the guys would just race for it, and whoever got possession got the ball. There wasn't a kickoff.
Right.
You gotta love that.
That should the NFL should, if the NFL should have done that, they should have paid attention.
Why not just put a piece of raw meat on the back of the player and have a dog chase him? I mean, come on.
Well, this brings back, the final thing I'll say today is that this brings me back to the least favorite sport I've ever had to watch as a parent, which is my children swimming competitively, which is by far the worst sport you can go to because it's usually in the middle of winter and you're going into a hot, muggy, disease-infested building. Is sitting there for, I remember arriving and my wife saying she's in race 3G. I'm like, where are they now? They're at 1B. I'm like, or they were 21B or something like that. 21B, and she was at 3G. I'm like, So,
my daughter was a high school swimmer, and the 500-yard freestyle, that's when you go out for lunch.
Yeah, it's horrible, and I know how hard it is. And then and to the poor swimmers who are swimming along and their teammates are in the, and I think of swimming as like a peaceful thing to do. They're swimming as hard as they can and they're making the turns, and all they hear in their head is like swoosh, 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 and then when they get the turn, they hear as their teammates are on the sideline screaming at them, and then they flip and they go swish, swish, swish.
Now, you know what my favorite thing about swimming, the 500 in particular, and it's also true in cross country. All my kids at one point ran some cross country as well, and that is the tradition, which I don't think has ever been written down but everyone seems to do it. The loudest cheers, of course, are always for the person who wins at the start, but an equally loud cheer is the last person to finish in the 500 yard freestyle in swimming, and also in cross country when the last guy crosses. There's always 25 or 30 people there who are cheering him or her on, and it's a great tradition. I mean, it's
a good sportsmanship, or just the parents being like, "Thank God the race is over."
I think it's sportsmanship. I really do.
I've cheered that in cross country, and yeah, the difference between track and swimming is that it's nicer outside for track, but it's the same. Besides that, it's the same awfulness, and there's no high jump in swimming. But besides that, there's no question. I swear, I bring this all up because my son, and I'll leave everybody on this. My son said when we went to my daughter's thing, two things that he said that were hilarious. One, we went outside, and then because we were just dying and it was freezing outside, we didn't know. We knew we were going to get sick, but we go outside anyway, and we come back in, and my wife's like, "You missed it. She's coming," and I missed the race just barely somehow, and my son turns to me and says, "Someday, Dad, maybe you'll come and watch me get out of a pool," which I loved. And my son then brought the whole house down by saying, "This would be a lot more exciting if the swimmers were being chased by sharks." That would definitely bring up the intensity quite a bit. Yes, indeed. Well, guys, that's all the time we have for today. Remember, it was great having you all on board. A really fun show. Remember to check out these videos I did, because maybe I'm just super geeky and just miss hockey so much, but watching these things just made me very, very happy. To watch the U.S. versus Canada and the U.S. versus the under-23. It just made me feel good again, and it's happy stuff. So without the buzz, it is just hockey. We will talk to you soon.